The 2021-2022 concert season marks the 70th anniversary of the Valley Symphony Orchestra. As the VSO looks towards the future of symphonic music in the Rio Grande Valley, we also look to our past and the stories and histories that have brought us to this moment. In this special commemorative podcast series, we'll hear from the musicians, community members, and organizational leaders who have not only helped build the VSO, but continue to nurture orchestral music in the Valley to this day. It's a story full of challenges met, hopes and dreams made real, and of course, beautiful music. So come along with us as we celebrate 70 years of the Valley Symphony Orchestra. There's an ancient Greek proverb that says, "A society grows great when old men plant trees in whose shade they shall never sit." It is a reminder that building anything that will stand the test of time is a long-term project. That we may never see the fruits of that project doesn't make the undertaking any less valuable. So too, the Valley Symphony Orchestra celebrating its 70th concert season this year is no accident. It is the result of many people who have chosen to give their efforts and talent to something that future generations may enjoy and continue to build on. In today's episode, we'll hear from a few of the people who have been involved in the long-term project that is the VSO. Join us as we discuss the Valley Symphony Orchestra, planting seeds.
My name's Daniel Saenz. I play cello. I'm originally from McAllen, Texas. Currently, I'm an associate professor at Sam Houston State University in Huntsville, Texas, north of Houston. My history with the VSO goes back, way back to even my early days of playing the cello in McAllen. We were a big family of 10, and I was also the youngest. So my oldest brother was about 20 years older than I, and of course he was listening to music from the 70s and 60s and a lot of funky music. But then my other brothers were listening to Van Halen and Iron Maiden. But I started listening to classical music because of my elementary music teachers who, gave us lots of classical music to listen to. I went to Wilson Elementary in McAllen, and, I think those teachers, I thank them. They really introduced us to a great amount of music.
When you're young, as Daniel was, there's a sense that the institutions you're surrounded by have simply always existed. What we often don't know is that every single one of them, including a string program in South Texas schools, first began as an idea. For many years, there were no string programs in the Rio Grande Valley. That is until a woman named Jacqueline Pry decided to change that. Jacqueline, or Jackie to her friends, was born in Ohio in 1926. She studied violin and piano, and after receiving her master's degree, decided to make the Valley her home in 1951.
What she did was really quite extraordinary. My name is Ruth Cruz, and I have been affiliated with the Valley Symphony Orchestra and Chorale in one capacity or another from 1973 until the pandemic. I was here after Jackie had managed to accomplish this. But the schools at that time were very concerned that they would be bleeding off of the band program. If you're bleeding off the band program in Texas, you are bleeding off of the football program in Texas. So, that was something she had to assure them would not happen, and it didn't.
And first in Edinburgh, she just kept going into school board meetings and, saying, give me a string program. I'm sure she said it much nicer than that. But eventually, I think they just got tired of her. So just give her a violin and a room and, let her go away. But she knew that she had to change the culture little by little. She introduced a fascinating way of teaching. If you were a cellist, for example, a lower string specialist, you may teach in a middle school, but you also taught at the high school. You gave lessons, and everybody got a free lesson per week, maybe 30 minutes or so. The cost of renting instruments was really low. So she did it in such a way that kids were encouraged and parents were encouraged to join. And the teachers themselves were, she interviewed them, she auditioned them, she hand chose them to make sure that the program was going to survive after the first few years. And all these years later, now we have, second generation people of my age and a little younger who grew up in her programs, the inspired programs that she helped create, and so it's wonderful. It's surviving very well now.
The result of her work led to one school district after the other desiring to have a string program and willing to support it and develop it. And so all of the major school districts in the Valley that I'm aware of have orchestral programs. You've got great marching bands, concert bands, orchestras, mariachi groups. It's really fantastic what has developed.
I was introduced to some of the best music very early on in symphonic music. And so this idea of rehearsing and collaborating and making people happy through concerts, that's what I remember the most. I started playing the cello when I was 11. And when I was in high school, I had the wonderful opportunity of playing in the VSO. Dr. Seal auditioned me and several other high school kids. And so if we were good enough and had a certain level, he would invite us to play in the orchestra. And I was sitting second chair next to Benjamin Ponder, who had just arrived a year or two before I joined the orchestra. And, he was a great mentor to me, not only because I got lessons from him, but I got to sit next to a professional when I was 15 and 16 years old in a professional orchestra, which, it's very hard to get that opportunity. In Houston, we have several youth symphonies. So a lot of kids have an opportunity to join a youth symphony in their neighborhood or their area of town. In McAllen, we didn't have that, right? So I was lucky to join a professional orchestra. I had this habit of just watching what Mr. Ponder was doing and just following, right? Of course, I made a lot of mistakes. I probably played in the wrong moments and whatever, but Mr. Ponder always made it a lot of fun. And he was a great mentor, showing me how to do things, writing things down from, on the score and showing me and counting when to come in and all that. I hadn't had much experience with a lot of conductors, but people like Dr. Seal were modeling what it is to be a professional. You show up prepared, you dress nicely, and you speak a certain way. He was always very nice. He provided a great model as a leader of a group. That's what I remember most about him. So I've been teaching here at Sam Houston State University since 2006, and I have a private studio, and I perform with Apereo Music of the Americas. And now I created a nonprofit named Brazos Music, which is actually inspired by my time in the Valley, because this idea of collaboration and mentorship that I got from all the teachers in Callan, I thought, how can we recreate that in a nonprofit? And so that's the mission now, is to try to develop mentorship programs for teachers so we could help students.
Going hand in hand with Jackie Pride's vision of cultivating new players was conductor Carl Seal's vision of building an orchestra from the local community.
My name is Linda Sobin. I have had many roles with the VSO, starting in 1974. When I came, I had a 2-year-old. I was 7 months pregnant. When we had our phone installed, the first phone call I received was from Dr. Carl Seal. He invited me to come over for supper and to play in the orchestra. The orchestra was small at that time. Audiences were small. The only public school music program was in Edinburgh. And Carl Seal had a vision to grow the orchestra. He had a vision of where we were going to go, and I'm very lucky that I was able to be a part of that.
My name is Jan Seal. I was married to the conductor, Carl Seal, for 56 years. Because the symphony had in it major components of the community, it didn't mean that these players were just hobby players, An unusual amount, I think, for a mid-sized symphony orchestra anywhere, Texas and beyond. But an unusual aspect is that how many of our musicians in the orchestra have formal training and advanced degrees in music. Many of them are teachers and inspire younger ones to be excellent enough to play. But I think that's probably not the case in other mid-size orchestras. A little story about that. One summer we were at a music conference in Central Texas. Carl was, as I recall, doing something with the choir. And one of the persons from another place where they had a town and gown group came to him and began to ask him about the symphony. Well, you know where we are, she said. In our symphony, we only have 20 people that we have to bring in for concerts, only 20. And we're very proud of that. The rest of them are from the area. And how many of yours have to be brought in for concerts? And Carl had a very quiet countenance, and he said in his deadpan way, "None." and I'll never forget the look on her face. How could that be, Because in smaller area symphonies like ours, it's not unusual for them to bring in 20 people from Dallas, Fort Worth, San Antonio, Houston to play the concert. But we don't have that here. So that's a unique aspect.
There were doctors, there were lawyers, there were teachers, and there were students. But as far as bringing in ringers for the orchestra, we didn't have to do it. Our musicians were here. They were ready to go. They were comprised of professional music teachers. They were comprised of university and high school string players. They were comprised of students who had joined the university, come to the university as a music major to play mariachi music. But they were sitting in our orchestra. They were learning different styles all the time. So we never had to go out and bring in ringers for the orchestra. We needed to inspire and attract the musicians that we had. And we were able to do that.
We'll now take a moment to enjoy Crystal Horizon, composed by Justin Reiter and performed September 24th, 2015 by the Valley Symphony Orchestra under the direction of Dr. Peter Dabrowski. In addition to growing players and growing the orchestra itself, the VSO has always innovated in growing its audience.
Moving forward, the Valley Symphony has a ton of good work to do. My name is Katie Coy, and I am the Executive Director of the Valley Symphony Orchestra. We really want to increase our scope. We are the Valley Symphony Orchestra, so we've been performing in McAllen and Edinburgh, and those communities have been so good to us. But, we used to perform in Reynosa. We have performed in Brownsville, South Padre, and, that's something we really want to do again. We believe that music enriches life in so many different ways. I think that there's a lot of different expressions of the Valley Symphony that we can explore moving forward. And, we are huge, enormous believers in arts education and what it can do in the life of a student. And, we perform our concerts for more than 10,000 students a year typically, but there's a lot of other things we can consider in terms of growing young artists, in terms of building arts education into the experience of students in the Valley. And we want to do more of that. Art changes kids' lives in so many very tangible ways.
The Valley Symphony Orchestra has never been an organization to rest on its laurels. Its vision for growth continues to this day, and the legacy of people like Jackie Pride and Carl Seal live on in players like Daniel Saenz, who will be returning to perform with the VSO this concert season.
Well, it's an honor, first of all, to be asked by Maestro Dabrowski to play in a 70th anniversary, to think about what the symphony has meant for me, that it was one of my first symphonic concerts, or the first symphonic concert I attended. And I heard the Saint-Saëns Cello Concerto, which I'm going to play in March. The feeling is kind of overwhelming. It's like, wow, this is really important for my life. And I'm just grateful to be part of this, and really happy to have this opportunity.
We hope you'll join us on the next episode as we delve further into the history and inner workings of the Valley Symphony Orchestra. For more information about tickets and future concerts, please visit valleyorchestra.org. VSO Voices is a production of the Valley Symphony Orchestra. It was produced by Charlie Vella and Angelica Gualberto, and executive produced by Katie Coy. We close today with an excerpt of Stravinsky's Pulcinella Suite, performed on October 29, 2016 by the Valley Symphony Orchestra under the direction of Dr. Peter Dabrowski.